Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, February 19, 2025. Labor Secretary nominee Lori Chavez-DeRemer explains at her Senate confirmation hearing why she no longer supports a union organizing bill that she had co-sponsored as a member of Congress. Senate confirms former U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler to lead the Small Business Administration. Senate Majority Leader John Thune asked about President Trump's endorsement of the House Republican budget resolution, which is more encompassing, especially including tax cuts, than the Senate Republican version, which is leaving tax cuts for a future bill. Senate Democrats respond to President Trump's claim that he will not cut Medicaid spending to pay for tax cuts. President Trump signs an executive order that subjects independent federal agency operations and regulations to more presidential control. We'll talk about its implications with Politico's White House reporter Megan Messerly. And President Trump escalates his verbal battle with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, calling him a dictator without elections, who has misspent U.S. aid, and who better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. From CBS News, former Republican Congresswoman Lori Chavez-DeRemer, President Trump's nominee to run the Labor Department, appeared before a Senate committee for her confirmation hearing on Wednesday, where she has faced questions about her support for a pro-union bill when she was in Congress and other labor issues. Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who sits on the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, has said he will oppose her because of her previous support for pro-labor policies. Chavez-DeRemer was one of only 3 Republicans who supported the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or PRO Act, in the last Congress. The bill would have strengthened labor protections for workers to collectively bargain and expanded penalties for employers that violate workers' rights. Chavez-DeRemer addressed her support for the bill in her opening statement, saying she recognized the legislation was imperfect and would implement President Trump's labor policies if confirmed as secretary. That was from the CBS News article. Here is Senator Paul during the hearing, asking the nominee about the PRO Act.
Welcome. I enjoyed our meeting in our office, and I know you're aware of this, but about half the country has right-to-work laws. 26 states have them. When you compare right-to-work states with non-right-to-work states, you see that the right-to-work states have double the employment growth. If you look at manufacturing jobs, they have 5 times the manufacturing job growth. If you look at disposable income in the right-to-work states, about $3,000 more per individual for disposable income in the right-to-work states. The PRO Act wasn't just about organizing or enabling unions to organize, which they already have the right to do. The PRO Act was about overturning right-to-work laws in 26 states, half of the country. Most of these states would argue that this would be a horrendous invasion of their prerogatives. The chairman asked you, and then the ranking member asked you, do you still support the PRO Act? The reason we want to know is this is a tremendous sort of invasion of the states' rights to decide these. This would be overturning the right-to-work laws in half of the country. Do you still support the PRO Act, or don't you support the PRO Act?
Thank you, Senator Paul, and I appreciated our meeting as well. I thought it was quite what you shared with me is how important it is to you and your state, and I heard that from many members. The right to work is a fundamental tenet of labor laws, where states have a right to choose if they want to be a right-to-work state, and that should be protected.
PRO Act would have overturned that.
Yes, thank you, Senator. I signed on to the PRO Act because I was representing Oregon's 5th District, but I also signed on to the PRO Act because I wanted to be at that table and have those conversations, but I fully, fairly, and support states who want to protect their right to work. I have said that to every senator that I have visited
with. So you
no
longer support the aspect of the PRO Act that would have overturned state right-to-work laws?
Yeah, there were so many parts.
That's a yes?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Lori Chavez-DeRemer, Labor Secretary nominee, questioned by Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, at today's Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee hearing. Washington Post writing an article about the hearing. While Trump loyalists have rallied behind her, Chavez-DeRemer faces skepticism from some GOP senators, including Senator Rand Paul, whose support she may need. Her confirmation is uncertain given the political divisions, although she could earn some support from Democratic senators, but many of those who had initially appeared open to embracing her now seem unlikely to, as they rally against the Trump administration's efforts to gut the federal government. That was from the Washington Post. Senator Paul mentioned that both the chair of the committee and ranking member asked about the PRO Act. Here is the ranking member, Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont.
Let me back up and say a word about what the PRO Act is. I'm not sure that most Americans know what it is. The reality is that in America today, labor unions have the support of some 70% of the American people. You know why? Because people understand that the big corporations and their bosses have all the power. People understand that CEOs make 300 times more than their workers. And people say, you know what, the only way we're going to get decent wages and benefits is when we organize. Millions of people want to join unions, but they can't join unions. You know why? Because corporations day after day operate in illegal ways. They break the law. They say to somebody, you were late 3 years ago. You're a pro-union, you were late 3 years, you're fired. We're going to take you into a captive audience, and for hour after hour, we're going to tell you how bad unions are. You want to join a union? Fine, you vote for a union, we're moving the plant to China. All of that stuff happens to be illegal. All of that stuff happens to be done every single day by corporate America. So, let me go back to the original question. PRO Act is designed to prevent illegal behavior on the part of corporate America, on the part of employers, so that workers can make a free choice. Do you support the PRO Act?
Thank you, Ranking Member Sanders, and I appreciate the conversation. I support the American worker. President Trump.
Okay, I don't mean to be rude.
No,
we
you're
don't
not
have
rude.
a lot of time. I'm gathering that you no longer support the PRO Act, is what I hear. That you support the American worker. That's what everybody here will say.
Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, ranking member on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, questioning Labor Secretary nominee Lori Chavez-DeRemer. More from the Washington Post article about today's hearing. President Trump nominated Chavez-DeRemer to lead the vast agency that enforces laws governing wages and overtime, workplace safety, and employer-sponsored health care and pensions, following some lobbying from unlikely bedfellows. Sean O'Brien, president of the Teamsters Union, and Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican from Oklahoma. More from the hearing, Senator Andy Kim, Democrat from New Jersey, asking the nominee about the minimum wage.
Is $7.25 an hour, is that enough to live on in America in the year 2025?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I know Ranking Member Sanders asked the same question. I recognize that it hasn't been changed, the minimum wage.
I guess I'm just asking you, do you think that's enough for a worker to live on? I'm just trying to get a sense of your vision for what the standard of life for an American worker is.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, for every state, for every community, again, I mentioned Oregon. What happens in Portland doesn't happen in Grants Pass. It certainly doesn't happen over in
I understand that about
Eastern
Oregon, but I guess I would ask you, what is $7.25 an hour? That is what in an annual term? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh.
It's not a math question.
Yeah,
so I'm just trying to get a sense of it. So it's about $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
So I guess I just want to ask you, do you think that there is a state in this country where someone can live comfortably on their own for $15,000 a year?
Well, I don't know if there is, but I would look and work with Congress. This is a congressional issue. I hope I can support you in telling the story of what's happening on the ground.
But that's what I'm just trying to get a sense of from you is what your vision is, because I do want to try to engage and see if we can work on that together. So for instance, biggest issue I keep hearing about is about affordability of housing and the challenges that people are facing when it comes to that. So again, I'm just trying to get a sense of where you're at on this. Do you have a sense of what percentage of someone's salary should go towards housing? Is there an upper limit in your mind of where you'd like to see that?
Well, I know oftentimes they talk about, if it's 10%, 20%, but here's my commitment, Senator. My commitment to you is to tell that story. I will come out and visit every state's and understand what's important to them and tell that story not only to the president, but also work with members of Congress. And if you all see fit, I will fully and fairly enforce the minimum wage laws that you all see fit and work together. I know, again, it
needs to be a conversation between us here.
It's important.
It's not just on us. You're going to be somebody who's supposed to be fighting for the American worker. Is 50% of someone's salary too high in terms of what goes towards housing?
Well, again, depending on what the salary is, people can determine that. I mean, if I had to take a guess, you're wanting me to say yes or no. It's hard to guess on what people want to spend on their housing, but I do want to help the American worker. I want them to make enough money. I want them to give them the opportunities, and I want to work with Congress on this issue because it is important. This is a sensitive issue. We hear about it all the time. You know that, and I know that.
As I said, the top issue. And I'll say that, when it comes to the lowest median rents that we see in this country right now, it's around $850, $900 a month, which is at around $10,000 a month.
Yeah.
And these are in some of the states where, again, the minimum wage is $15,000 a year. So talking about 2/3 of their salaries.
Senator Andy Kim, Democrat from New Jersey, questioning Labor Secretary nominee Lori Chavez-DeRemer at today's hearing. It ran about 2 hours and 15 minutes. We covered it live on the C-SPAN networks, and you can find the video in its entirety at our website, cspan.org. Senator Christopher Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, asked the nominee about Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, and they're seeking internal government data and conflicts of interest.
Elon Musk is right now the subject of several OSHA investigations. Multiple companies are subject of multiple investigations. His rocket company has an injury rate that's about 9 times higher than the industry average. I heard you say that you're going to protect data privacy, but let me just ask once again the very specific question. Will you commit to denying access to Elon Musk or any of his representatives to information about labor violations at OSHA or any other information about labor violation investigations at the Department of Labor?
Thank you, Senator, on this same issue, committing to the privacy. Again, I know that for most listening to this, it seems as though when we're trying to answer these questions, but I have not been in these conversations, as I'm not confirmed. I only see what has happened possibly on the news and so forth. The president has the executive power to have his coalition of advisors and determine what's best for the American people. He made a promise to the American people that he was going to do these things and check into what is happening. Other than that, I have not been read in on any of this. And if confirmed, I commit to taking a deeper look and working with your office and any other office on this issue. But at this point, again,
this one feels pretty simple.
Senator Christopher Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, and the Labor Secretary nominee, Lori Chavez-DeRemer, at today's Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee hearing. That committee is scheduled to vote on Thursday on the nomination of Linda McMahon to be Education Secretary. That'll be at 10 a.m. Eastern, and we'll have it on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and streamed at cspan.org. This is Washington Today. Associated Press writes that the U.S. Senate on Wednesday confirmed Kelly Loeffler, a Georgia businesswoman and former senator to lead the Small Business Administration, returning a stalwart supporter of President Donald Trump to Washington. At SBA, Loeffler will oversee the entity that describes itself as the only cabinet-level federal agency fully dedicated to small business, by providing counseling, capital, and contracting expertise as the nation's only go-to resource and voice for small businesses. The vote in the Senate today was 52-46. Senator Joni Ernst, Republican of Iowa, chair of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee, spoke on the Senate floor ahead of the vote.
In just a few minutes, we will be asked to decide whether the Honorable Kelly Loeffler should be confirmed as Administrator of the Small Business Administration. As chair of the Small Business Committee, I would like to strongly urge all of my colleagues to vote yes and support her nomination. As a successful business leader, Kelly Loeffler is the perfect person to increase transparency and accountability at the SBA and prioritize the needs of small businesses. Throughout the committee's rigorous nomination process, Senator Loeffler has been thoroughly cooperative and impressive. She passed out of the committee with a bipartisan vote of 12-7. Over the course of her career, Senator Loeffler has shown how hard work, grit, and Midwestern common sense can take you from Illinois' soybean fields to CEO of your own company, and now to lead a government agency. I am confident that Senator Loeffler will ensure SBA once again works for all small businesses and usher in a golden age for America's small businesses. Senator Loeffler is the right person to lead the Small Business Administration. She understands the burdens facing small businesses and recognizes how Washington can often serve as a barrier and a hindrance to their success. I have no doubt that she will fight to make sure Main Street is heard. Again, I urge all of my colleagues to support her nomination and confirm Senator Loeffler as Administrator of the Small Business Administration.
Senator Joni Ernst, Republican of Iowa, chairs the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee on the Senate floor before the Senate voted 52-46 to confirm Kelly Loeffler as SBA Administrator. It was almost party line. One Democrat voted yes with Republicans, Jackie Rosen of Nevada. One of the Democrats who voted no, Patty Murray of Washington State, posting on X, I voted no to confirm Kelly Loeffler to run the SBA. Just last week, Elon fired 720 employees at SBA, including those focused on disaster recovery efforts. Not a peep from Loeffler. Elon and Trump are not looking out for small businesses, just themselves. And the Senate Republican leadership says that so far the Senate has confirmed 18 Trump cabinet or cabinet-level nominees. The next one expected on Thursday. The Senate will vote on Kash Patel for FBI director. President Donald Trump today posted on Truth Social that he prefers the U.S. House version of a budget resolution, which Majority Leader Steve Scalise says the House will take up next week, versus the U.S. Senate version, which the Senate is expected to pass by the end of this week. President Trump writing, the House and Senate are doing a spectacular job of working together as one unified and unbeatable team. However, unlike the Lindsey Graham version of the very important legislation currently being discussed, the House resolution implements my full America First agenda, everything, not just parts of it. We need both chambers to pass the House budget to kickstart the reconciliation process and move all of our priorities to the concept of one big, beautiful bill. It will, without question, make America great again. Post from President Trump. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, was asked about this at a news conference after the Senate Republican closed-door lunch meeting that happens every week. It was attended this week by Vice President J.D. Vance.
I think, as you all know, Senator Graham and the Budget Committee last week reported out a budget resolution, and thank them for doing that. That tees up an opportunity for us to move that across the floor. And as you all know, that unlocks budget reconciliation, which will follow from it. And this particular budget resolution, I think, as you know, addresses the president's priority, top priority, which is securing the border and implementing and putting in place his immigration policies, rebuilding our military, and creating energy dominance for this country. So it's focused on those three things. It's focused on the border, it's focused on national security, and it's focused on energy. The House, as you know, is working on a different budget resolution, and we certainly wish them all the success in moving it. We will work closely with them. More power to them. What they're trying to do is get the tax piece of this done, and done quickly. And obviously, we all want to see the president's tax priorities addressed, which is making not only the tax 2017 taxes, extending them, but making them permanent. And that's certainly the priority for most, if not all, of the Republican senators here in our conference as well. So we will continue to work together in a way that ultimately gets us across the finish line and helps put the president's agenda in place. And as I said before, I think those priorities are very, very clear as outlined in our budget resolution. And coupled with what the House is doing, I think we're on a good track to achieve success. And if we achieve success, that's going to be a good thing, not only for the president, but for this country. Questions?
Leader, good afternoon. Are you defying the president by going ahead with your own budget plan when he pretty strongly endorsed what the House was working on?
Well, I think he's made it clear for a long time that he would prefer one big, beautiful bill. And we're fine with that, too. If the House can produce one big, beautiful bill, we're prepared to work with them to get that across the finish line. But we believe that the president also likes optionality. And the legislation that we'll be working and voting on tomorrow addresses, as I said, those three critical priorities. And hopefully, in the end, we'll be able, whether it's one bill or two bills, to get all the things that the president has outlined as objectives across the finish line in a reconciliation bill. The question right now, again, is a tactical one. The strategic objective is still the same, and that is to extend the tax policy, strengthen the economy, rebuild the military, create energy dominance for this country, and secure our border.
The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, at a Senate Republican Leadership and News Conference in the U.S. Capitol. An article from Roll Call reads, once a budget resolution is adopted in both chambers, key congressional committees can get to work on writing the actual reconciliation bill, which is immune to a filibuster, like the budget resolution, to implement their fiscal priorities. Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington State Appropriations Committee ranking member, spoke at the Senate Democratic Leadership News Conference today about what to expect when the Senate votes on the budget resolution on Thursday. Under Senate rules, senators can propose an unlimited number of amendments to budget-related measures, and when debate time is expired, the amendments get votes, one after the other, sometimes late into the night. It's known as a vote-a-rama.
Senate Democrats are going to make sure the American people know this is the most flat-out pro-billionaire, anti-middle-class budget we have ever seen. There is zero chance we're going to let Republicans pass this pro-billionaire budget the easy way without a fight. We're going to put them on the record for everything Trump and Elon are doing to create real fraud, waste, and abuse. We are going to make sure the people back home know that Elon Musk is firing VA doctors and food safety inspectors for no cause whatsoever and illegally defunding the programs that Americans care about. Republicans will have to answer, are they for protecting Medicaid or for letting kids and seniors lose their health care? Are they for supporting our veterans or for cutting their benefits? Because these are the kinds of real choices they will have to make with the budget that they are laying out. They better get ready for a late night and a long morning.
Senator Patty Murray, Democrat of Washington State Appropriations Committee ranking member, at a news conference in the U.S. Capitol. And a reminder, you can always follow the Senate live, gavel to gavel, 24 hours a day if necessary, on C-SPAN 2 television and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. New York Times writes that President Trump's big legislative ambition, extending his signature tax cuts, may have just crashed into his newly expressed wish to protect the Medicaid program. Mr. Trump said Tuesday night on Fox News that he wouldn't make cuts to Medicaid, the federal state health insurance program that mostly covers poor Americans. But making substantial cuts to Medicaid is a key part of congressional Republicans' plan to extend the tax cuts. The budget Speaker Mike Johnson negotiated, a first step in passing that agenda, calls for around $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid in an effort to counterbalance a portion of the tax cuts. That was the reporting from the New York Times. This is what President Trump said Tuesday night in the Fox News interview.
Social Security won't be touched, other than if there's fraud or something we're going to find it's going to be strengthened, but won't be touched. Medicare, Medicaid, none of that stuff is going to be touched.
Nothing.
You don't have to. Now, if there are illegal migrants in the system, we're going to get them out of the system and all of that fraud, but it's not going to be touched.
President Donald Trump in the Fox News interview that aired Tuesday night. Senate Democrats held a news conference today on that pledge not to cut Medicaid. Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin chairs the Health Appropriations Subcommittee.
Last night, the president falsely claimed he would not cut Medicaid and tried to paper over his party's very plan to cut Medicaid. This lie lasted all of 12 hours. This morning we saw exactly what we knew all along. The Republican Party is united in their drive to cut Medicaid and rip health care from millions of seniors, disabled Americans, children, and so many more. This, in and of itself, is troubling and against the wishes of the American people, but it gets worse. And at the very center of it all, their ultimate goal, what everything is working towards, is a massive tax break for the very wealthy. That is the whole ballgame. This whole process to find room in the budget for those cuts is consuming the House, the Senate, and the White House. The White House is scrambling, sometimes illegally, to fire doctors at the VA, lay off cancer researchers, and so much more. Republicans in Congress are haggling over whether they're going to do this in one bill or two bills. The Senate and House are fighting each other to see who should go first. To be honest, none of that process really matters to the people of my state. What matters is this: who gets the tax cuts and who is going to pay for it. So today we land on their number one target to pay for these tax breaks: Medicaid. Medicaid provides health care to over 70 million Americans, including over 30 million children and 8 million seniors. Medicaid provides essential care for about 10 million adults with disabilities. Medicaid helps almost 2/3 of all nursing home residents have a safe roof over their heads, and the list goes on. That's right. Congressional Republicans are ripping away health care from our most vulnerable to fund tax breaks for their wealthy friends.
Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat of Wisconsin, at a news conference with other Senate Democrats in Washington. There was another protest in Washington, D.C. on the streets outside a federal agency targeted for budget and staffing cuts by DOGE, Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. This time it was the NIH, National Institutes of Health. One of the speakers, Congressman Glenn Ivey, Democrat of Maryland.
I'm a cancer survivor. I lost my father to Alzheimer's and Parkinson combined. I lost my mother to heart disease. The things that you all are doing, the research that you're doing is making a difference. We're all counting on you to continue to have a chance to work. And that's why we're here to fight the administration to make sure we can continue allowing you all to do the basic research that we need to save lives, not just here in the United States, but across the world, right? Absolutely, absolutely. And we need to make sure we keep the pressure on every day. I really want to thank you all for coming out here today. When I heard the report of the weather last night, I said, man, it's going to be a low turnout event. But aren't we out here strong today? Yeah, out here strong today. I thought about the Montgomery bus boycott. They marched day after day through the winter, all the way to work and back. You guys are out here carrying on that tradition, and you're going to make a difference just like they did, right? Absolutely. We got to keep going. We need every mini march on Washington day after day to push this forward. We got to fight to take the Congress back. We got to wait 2 years to do it, but we're going to take it back, right? We're going to make Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House in 2 years, right? Yeah, we got to make that difference, and we've got to make sure we keep pushing the Republicans now. I know it's important for us to try and fight to make sure government workers can keep their jobs today, and we're going to keep working on it day after day. But we've got to flip those 3 Republicans in the House to make them do it. Some of them represent government workers just like you, right? Some of them represent people who get sick from diseases you're doing the research on, right? Some of them represent people who are working to make a difference in science and make a difference in the country, right? That's why we know we're going to win. You're doing the right things. You're on the right side of history. You're on the right side of science. On to victory. Keep up the great work. Have a great day.
Congressman Glenn Ivey, Democrat of Maryland, at a rally outside the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C., protesting proposed budget and staffing cuts to the National Institutes of Health, NIH. Story from WBUR-TV. A ruling by a federal judge in Boston has paused the battle over NIH funding for now, benefiting universities across the country, including in Republican states that have not joined the lawsuits. In response to separate suits filed by 22 states and a cohort of universities, U.S. District Judge Angel Kelly in Boston ordered a temporary block on the Trump administration's plans to cap NIH funding for indirect expenses that recipients say are a crucial part of medical research. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea. It's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Story from USA Today, President Donald Trump called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator without elections Wednesday in a Truth Social post, extending a verbal sparring match between the two world leaders the day after U.S. and Russian officials met without Ukrainian representation to discuss terms to end Russia's 3-year-old invasion. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing former President Joe Biden like a fiddle. A dictator without elections, Zelensky better move fast or he is not going to have a country left, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social. Article continues that Zelensky canceled an election scheduled for spring 2024, saying it could not be held in the middle of a war and the imposition of martial law in accordance with the Ukrainian constitution. Zelensky told reporters, "We have seen this disinformation. We understand that it is coming from Russia," adding that Donald Trump lives in this disinformation space. That was from USA Today. The U.S. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, was asked about all this today at a news conference in the U.S. Capitol.
You have long supported Ukraine, aid to Ukraine. Are you at all concerned about the president's rhetoric blaming Ukraine for starting the war and calling for elections in Ukraine, which is what Vladimir Putin is calling for?
I think what I'm in support of is a peaceful outcome and result in Ukraine. And I think right now the administration, the president, and his team are working to achieve that. And I think right now you got to give them some space. Honestly, this is something, this war is ground on now for 3 years. There's been a lot of cost, a lot of death, a lot of injury associated with it, and I think it's in everybody's best interest, Ukraine, Russia, Europe, the United States, if they can bring about a peaceful conclusion to the war. And so that's what this is about right now, and I think most of us want to support their efforts as they move in that direction and hopefully to a successful outcome.
Call him a dictator.
Would you call Ukrainian President Zelensky a dictator as President Trump has?
Well, I like I said, the president speaks for himself. What I want to see is a peaceful result, a peaceful outcome. And I think right now there's a negotiation going on, and let's see where that ultimately leads. Hopefully it'll get to the outcome we all want to see.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, at today's news conference in the U.S. Capitol building. More from President Donald Trump's lengthy post today on Truth Social. Think of it, a modestly successful comedian, Volodymyr Zelensky, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won, that never had to start, but a war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, in caps, in quotes, will never be able to settle. Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, the minority whip, spoke on the Senate floor today about President Trump's comments.
For the past 3 years, we have supported Ukraine with the funding it needed to beat back Russian aggression and defend the front line of democracy in Europe. And the Ukrainian people have done just that. 46,000 Ukrainian lives have been lost. 46,000 defending their nation against Putin. We have joined with our NATO allies and many other countries around the world standing by Ukraine. And they have shown an extraordinary courage, a courage for the history books. But it turns out that the new President of the United States, Donald Trump, does not see this the same way as I do, and we have for 3 years. The fact of the matter is this: President Donald Trump is a pushover for Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's always been, and he'll always be. Since Trump took office, he has played right into Putin's hands. The outrageous comments he posted today on Truth Social make that painfully clear. In the post, Trump attacked not Putin for the invasion, but the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, blaming him for Russia's invasion that, as I said, has killed more than 46,000 Ukrainians and displaced millions more. And it's disgusting to say that President Trump called Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, a dictator without elections. Can you believe it? An American president selling out a Democratic leader bravely defending his country from an actual dictator, Putin, a former KGB apparatchik at that. It is insulting to say that. It is shameful. But from this president, it's no surprise. President Trump is doing nothing more than parroting Kremlin propaganda and spreading the lies that Putin whispers into his ear. I could call on Trump to apologize to the people of Ukraine who have suffered so much because of this Russian invasion, but it would be a waste of breath. Let me be clear to President Trump. You don't make America great by selling out our nation and our allies to a Russian dictator.
Senator Dick Durbin, the minority whip, Democrat from Illinois, today on the Senate floor. President Zelensky posting on X today, I spoke with U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina. We greatly appreciate the bicameral and bipartisan support of the U.S. Congress to the Ukrainian people in our fight against the Russian aggression. As always, Senator Graham is constructive and doing a lot to help bring peace closer. It's all important that security guarantees remain on the table and that they work for Ukraine, for real and lasting peace. Thank you for your support. That post from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Keith Kellogg, U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine and Russia, is in Ukraine today, meeting with leaders of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and intelligence agencies. Tomorrow, he's scheduled to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This is Washington Today. Article from Politico begins that President Donald Trump on Tuesday signed a sweeping executive order bringing independent agencies under the control of the White House, an action that would greatly expand his power but is likely to attract significant legal challenges. In just a moment, we'll talk with a reporter who wrote that story. But first, the White House Staff Secretary Will Scharf spoke about this on Tuesday, standing next to President Trump during the news conference at the President's Club, Mar-a-Lago in Florida.
We have another executive order that President Trump signed relating to independent agencies. This executive order would establish important oversight functions in the Office of Management and Budget and its subsidiary office, OIRA, supervising independent agencies and many of their actions, and also reestablishes the longstanding norm that only the President or the Attorney General can speak for the United States when stating an opinion as to what the law is.
Joining us now to talk about President Donald Trump's independent agencies executive order is Megan Messerly, Politico White House reporter. Thanks so much for being with us. What does this executive order do or claim to do?
So this brings under the purview of the White House a number of independent agencies. So essentially what it does is it says that these agencies now must report certain details to the head of the president's director of the Office of Management and Budget, who is, of course, Russ Vought. It empowers Vought to establish performance standards and management objectives, to require the heads of these independent agencies to report periodically to the president. So in short, it essentially brings these agencies under the purview of the White House.
What are some examples of these agencies and what regulations would be affected? What kinds?
Yeah, so it really affects a broad swath of independent agencies. So we're talking about the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission. It even would impact the Federal Reserve, though the executive order says it would not impact the Fed's monetary responsibilities, but still includes them in this order. And so, this really could have impacts for, a wide number of regulations, it says, any sort of major regulations need to come through OMB. We've seen this in the past. Occasionally, these independent agencies, their policy goals align with whoever is in office, but oftentimes it does not. And so, what we've heard from the administration is this is an effort to make sure that these, independent agencies are aligned with the administration's agenda. But talk to folks who are concerned about this, and they say, there's a reason that these agencies are independent. They provide an important oversight role separate from the White House.
You write the executive order as part of President Trump's efforts to test the so-called unitary executive theory. What is that?
Yeah, so this is this theory that essentially all executive branch power should be under the president's authority. And that's why, the president and his supporters, including Russ Vought, sort of reject this idea that there should be any independent agencies. They, again, under this unitary executive theory, believe that all elements of the executive branch need to be reporting to the president. And this is something that Vought has long talked about. He has long criticized what he refers to as the fourth branch of government, the administrative state. Sort of one of his main priorities is, ensuring that any of these independent elements are brought within the control of the White House and within the president's control.
We're talking with Megan Messerly from Politico. A number of other of the president's executive orders have been subject to lawsuits. Will this one also likely go to court?
Yes, we're certainly expecting it to make its way to court. In fact, this, sort of broader theory we've already seen come up in the president's decision-making. I'm thinking about his firing of a couple folks at the National Labor Relations Board, including the board's former chair and its general counsel. He also dismissed the director of the Office of Government Ethics. We've already seen legal challenges come up as a result of this. And I think this executive order is viewed in large part as sort of putting pen to paper behind this broad theory that the administration has already been putting into practice. And now we'll see as these cases work their way through the system, challenging whether or not the president does have this authority to, fire heads of these independent agencies. That certainly is going to work its way through the court system, and we'll see how the court ultimately feels about this idea of the unitary executive theory.
Has there been any pushback from Democrats in Congress, and what do Republicans think?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen broad pushback, right, to the administration's actions from Democrats and concerns bringing these independent agencies under the thumb of the White House. I'm thinking about what we saw, from someone like Senator Elizabeth Warren after we saw, some of these actions start to take place at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? That's supposed to be an independent agency that provides oversight of these, banks and financial institutions. So I think we've seen pretty strong pushback from Democrats, not as much with Republicans, even those who have long, advocated for some of these independent, oversight roles. They've largely been pretty quiet about the president's actions here.
Megan Messerly, Politico's White House reporter. Find her articles at Politico.com and on X at Megan Messerly. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Wall Street today, the Dow up 71. NASDAQ and S&P both up 14. Politico's E&E Daily writes that lawmakers who failed to cinch a bipartisan permitting and transmission deal late last year are now going back to the drawing board. The first chance to write a new story comes Wednesday, as the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee will convene a hearing on federal environmental reviews. Senators will hear from executives in the building and energy industries who have long carped about the country's slow project approval process. C-SPAN covered this hearing. Here is the chair, Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Republican of West Virginia, asking two witnesses from Associated General Contractors and National Association of Home Builders why permitting reform is needed.
Ms. Balcones, under current law and regulation, projects can take years or even decades to progress from concept to completing the NEPA process. And what are the real-world impacts of this lengthy timeline for projects on consumers of goods and services that your members produce?
Thank you, Senator, for that question.
And then, Mr. Harris, I'm going to go to you with the same question. Go ahead.
For the construction industry, delays cause uncertainty, and they also cause workforce instability. Our contractors can't commit to hiring workers. They can't order materials when there are delays. on breaking ground for projects, often because they're tied up for years with lawsuits. Delays also drive up costs. They increase project costs as inflation and material shortages make projects more expensive over time. Delays also increase investments. Delays are preventing AGC members from building our quality of life and delivering safe projects that are going to benefit communities.
Across the country. Mr. Harris, your home building.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The cost of permitting adds to the cost of housing. And every time, as I said in my testimony, every time you raise the cost of a house, $1,000, you lock out 106,000 family units. That's substantial. You know, we speak about the value of home ownership. Well, the value of home ownership is good for everyone. It stabilizes families, it stabilizes neighborhoods, it stabilizes communities, employee bases, volunteer bases. Home ownership is a public good. And in trying to increase or make better the processes for permitting, then we can decrease the cost. The time value of money for developers, home builders add to the cost of a house. And right now, where we've seen the average cost of a house go up $90,000 in the last 2.5 years, we have locked so many people out of the American dream.
Thank you. And I know there's a shortage as well, so we can get into that maybe later.
Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Republican of West Virginia, chair of the Environment and Public Works Committee, questioning two of today's witnesses, Leah Peconis, Associated General Contractors of America General Counsel, and Carl Harris, National Association of Home Builders Chair. The committee's ranking Democrat, Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, said during his opening statement today that Democrats would like to reach a bipartisan permitting reform agreement, but there's one major condition.
A word of warning, however. Democrats cannot agree to any permitting reform unless and until the Trump administration ends its lawless disregard for congressional authority and judicial orders. Billions in obligated funds remain frozen behind a fog bank of silent executive contumacy, in blatant disregard of constitutional separation of powers, direct court orders, and basic principles of law. I have to note, as a former U.S. attorney, I'm particularly disgusted with DOJ, where things are so bad that deeply conservative career prosecutors have resigned rather than carry out corrupt orders from Trump cronies. But it's everywhere, and it's hurting people and projects. Until the administration shows that it will honor its oath to faithfully and impartially execute the laws, we can have zero confidence that any legislative compromise on permitting reform will be executed lawfully. It falls to my Republican friends to bring this lawless, unconstitutional madness to an end, and I wish them good luck in that.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island, ranking member on the Environment and Public Works Committee at today's hearing. Story from a Gothamist. The Trump administration revoked federal approval for congestion pricing on Wednesday, making good on a campaign promise to kill the tolls that since January 5th have charged drivers a $9 daytime fee to enter Manhattan south of 60th Street. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy sent Governor Kathy Hochul a letter stating his agency revoked federal approval for the tolls, which were permitted to launch through a federal highway agency pilot program. Duffy wrote in the letter, "I share the president's concerns about the impacts to working-class Americans who now have an additional financial burden to account for in their daily lives." That was the story from Gothamist. It also notes that New York's Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the MTA, has filed a lawsuit. And President Trump posting today on Truth Social, "Congestion pricing is dead. Manhattan and all of New York is saved. Long live the king." Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.